Few things in horror can compare to the feeling of being hunted. It's a fear as old as humanity itself, the fear of being helpless, desperately trying to find a way to survive as something more powerful and capable than you slowly closes in. It's a feeling that can only be described as visceral, and horror as a genre has been trying to capture that feeling for decades. But in my opinion, horror games do the best job of relaying those feelings of helplessness and dread. Games such as Amnesia, Silent Hill, Outlast, Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion. All these games capture that feeling of being hunted and isolated, where every moment of your continued life seems more unlikely than the last. Which brings me to the game we're going to be looking at today. So Little Nightmares was released in 2017 to a pretty good reception. The game got millions of views on YouTube, well over 90% positive reviews on Steam, and releases on Windows, PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and Stadia? Who the hell uses Stadia? And on top of all that, the game went free for a few days in May 2021, roping in a bunch of new players. But despite all of that, I just don't hear people talk about this game very much, which is a shame because it really is quite good. The first thing you'll notice about this game is the art style, which is instantly striking and memorable. Sort of a dark cartooniness with a grim realism set into the undertone. Also, the camera angle. The whole game is set in this pulled back side view, kind of like a spectator view, if that makes any sense. Sort of like watching a play. Don't take that to mean this game isn't immersive though, you still feel close and connected with your character the whole time. And the game is still a 3D-ish space that you can walk around in, or 2.5D? I don't know. But it's not like a side-scroller. The downside of which being that the angle can actually make things a little finicky sometimes, but we'll get to that later. You play as Six, a raincoat-clad 9-year-old child who sleeps in a suitcase and hangs out with Pyramid Head. And about 8 seconds into the game, you find out that your only source of light is a little pocket lighter. And if you're hoping to find something more powerful later on, forget it. This is the only light source you get. I mean, sure, you can ignite lanterns along the way occasionally, but that rarely does anything for you beyond netting you an achievement. Most horror games give you a flashlight or maybe a lantern and put you in exceedingly dark areas. The idea being to limit your visibility and make you paranoid that you're about to get jumped at any time. But Little Nightmares takes that one step further by limiting your visibility to only a small orb of light around your character, blocking you from seeing further and increasing the paranoia. Or at least, you'd think so, that's not really the case in practice. See, the lighting in this game is done in such a way that you can actually see a silhouette of your character even in really dark areas. Plus, the game doesn't really go full pitch black too often, mostly consisting of areas that are dark but still visible. I'm kind of torn on this, because on one hand, the idea of only having a wimpy little lighter as my only source of light in a game like this is kinda cool, but the lighting and shading is done so masterfully to keep everything so dark yet visible, and the silhouettes, I mean, it's just hard to be upset about the lighter not being used as much as you'd think. The way you progress in this game generally consists of solving environmental puzzles, if you could really call them that. I mean, they're mostly very obvious. And then maybe doing some light platforming or something. It's not hard or confusing, but that's okay. It's not really meant to be an exceedingly challenging game. So you're making progress, things are pretty straightforward so far, and then suddenly, with no warning, This is where Little Nightmares starts to introduce one of its favorite horror tricks, that being just straight up hardcore tension. There are a lot of times in this game where you'll be hiding under tables, sneaking right under your hunter's nose, and just barely managing to get away. It's very, what would be a good word for this? Tense, harrowing, pants-shittingly terrifying, any of those could work. And after seeing where this game is going, I think it's time to talk about the tone and atmosphere on display here, which, if you haven't noticed yet, is a bit grim. Just a bit. Most of Little Nightmares takes place in these grimy, dystopian places where even the nicest areas you see seem run down, unclean, and decrepit. The majority of your time here will be spent worming around the innards of this place, going from bad to worse as you stumble upon one horrifying discovery after the next. In the first sections of this game, you're being stalked by the janitor, which is the thing we saw earlier. He's this misshapen, barely humanoid thing with long, gangly arms, and he's just, ugh. He's blind, as is evidenced by the wrappings over his eyes, but has great hearing, making you walk on cloths to avoid making noise on the creaky wooden floors. His job seems to be to take children and wrap them up in these sacks, sending them off somewhere, which you later learn is actually a kitchen, and I'd really rather not think about the implications of that. Jeez, man. Another thing you'll notice is all the shoes lying around this place. I haven't seen too many people mention this, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that these shoes belong to people that died in some way or another. And after dropping into the ventilation shafts to escape that long-armed freak, you eventually run across this room. The amount of death represented here is staggering, and a great example of environmental storytelling, which this game loves to do. Oh yeah, and also there's a Dianoga in here, so good luck with that. Alright, so now it's time for the obligatory part of the video where I talk about the soundtrack, because good horror game soundtracks are awesome, and Little Nightmares has a great one. Some of the songs have a dark, childlike nature to them. And others are basically just dark ambient, which I'm always a fan of. But when the tension in the gameplay kicks up, the soundtrack matches it with a more frantic and stressful tone. All great stuff, really enhances the experience. Little Nightmares just wouldn't be the same without the soundtrack. And while we're on the topic of audio, the sound design is fantastic as well, which probably goes without saying. I mean, when everything else has so much love and care put into it, you could easily expect the sound design to shine as well. And it does. Special mention goes to this part where you can push this cage off the side of a bridge and... Ooh, man. See, they didn't have to add that, and that's one of the things I really like about this game. They went above and beyond to make everything just that much more detailed and immersive. The game isn't that long, you can beat it in just a few hours, but the whole experience, beginning to end, is as polished as you could ask for. This right here is what happens when you have talented designers that care about what they're doing. I think this cage part might have impressed me a bit too much, but that's okay, because it gives me a chance to talk about another thing that really makes this game what it is, and that's the scale. The environments in this game are enormous, and sometimes the camera zooms out a ways to really give you the full effect. You're just a kid in this game, dwarfed by everything around you, and it can be truly overwhelming to see the mammoth scale of this mechanical hellscape. It really hits home the feeling that you're just barely slipping through the cracks to survive, sometimes literally. Now, I'm giving this game a lot of praise, and deservedly so, but it's not perfect. No game is. The one major problem here being the controls. Hoo boy, this game just does not control very well. Mainly due to the camera angle, I would assume it's kinda hard to get a decent read on where you are in the environment, because the depth perception can be a little screwy. Add to that the fact that there's a little delay when you start moving and turn around and stuff, to play a little animation, and yikes. I mean, the controls aren't always like that, but when they are, it's a massive pain in the ass and just curb stomps the immersion. As for other issues with the game, well, the AI can sometimes be a bit odd. There was this one time where a dude looked under a table, basically directly at me, and didn't notice. Okay. But honestly, as for other downsides, I can't really think of anything else that wouldn't just be nitpicky. And the game is still good even with the problems I mentioned. Anyway, here's your obligatory warning that we're entering spoiler territory now. Not that this game has much of a story, at least not one that you would really notice on a first playthrough. But there isn't really much more to talk about without mentioning the last couple parts of the game. Alright, here we go. So for the majority of this game, you're following this production line of sorts. You start by seeing the janitor, who takes children and wraps them up in sacks, which then gets sent off to a kitchen, where primarily meat is made from various sources. But after escaping the kitchen, you make your way into the dining area, and suddenly you're among what could only be considered the upper class of this world. All the misery and desolation of everywhere else you've been so far, the guests care nothing for. They exist simply to gorge themselves on whatever happens to look edible, including you, of course. Throughout Little Nightmares, there are a few scenes where your character starts to get hungry. This seems to be pretty urgent, as you're forced to eat anything that happens to be around, consisting of a piece of bread dropped by a helpful stranger, a rotting piece of meat, and worst of all, a rat. The reason I bring this up now is because after escaping the guests, your hunger starts to take over again. Luckily, there's a little friend nearby to help. These guys are called gnomes, spelled N-O-M-E, and you find them in secrets throughout the game. And when you find one, you can give them a hug. Aw, how cute. These things have always been here for you throughout the game, serving as comfort. No matter how isolated and hunted you feel, the gnomes are a breath of fresh air whenever you find one. So back to what I was saying. Consumed with the pain of starvation, a gnome offers you a small meal and... As you can see, Little Nightmares thrives on the unexpected, and seeing your own character give in to all the madness and hunger in such a startling way is a great method of delivering one of the last big scares in the game. But now, there's only one obstacle left in the way, and this is the most sinister one yet, canonically anyway. Gameplay-wise, this last segment is probably the easiest in the whole game. This is the Lady, a character foreshadowed since the dream in the very beginning. She's more or less the one behind this place. All the greed and senseless slaughter is because of her, and now it's up to you to shut her down. I kind of wish this last segment was a little bit longer, to be honest, because it seems kind of short coming after the rest of the game, but whatever. Basically, you just explore for a bit and break into this boarded up room where you find a mirror, and at this point, it's pretty obvious what you need to do. The final boss fight of the game pretty much consists of waiting for the lady to attack you and then blocking her with the mirror, which does damage to her. Just like the rest of the game, it's easy but suitably weird and atmospheric, so I would say it's a perfectly respectable way to close out the game. And after a few minutes of fighting, it's over.